Hello. Do we really have freedom within our education? From 1st to 8th grade, we don't have decisions in what subjects we take. In high school and college, we have more freedom of choice, but a good amount of the classes we do take are required by the standard. I want to talk about how much freedom we have as of right now, how we're lacking in the freedom department for schools, and how the schooling system can be improved to better the amount of freedom for the masses. Now first, I want to start off by stating my point of view on the subject. I believe that education is necessary to have for a well-functioning, innovative society. However, what I also believe is that students don't have enough freedom in their path of education. Alright, so I'm sure we've all heard teachers say that school is supposed to be for learning and not for a good grade. But let's be real here. That really just isn't the case. Students nowadays are bombarded with so much homework, tests, and projects that we really don't have enough time to worry about absorbing the knowledge for the sake of learning. I know what you may be thinking. Tests, homework, and projects are all a part of the learning process, and that's true, they are. However, with the amount of information that we have to learn and the loads of homework and tests that we have to take to prove our knowledge are just overkill. There's a point where all of the work just becomes a hassle and begins to weigh us down. An article from Professors Gerald Letendre and David Baker from Pennsylvania State University found in their research on whether more homework makes better grades, and the results are actually pretty interesting. The research showed that more homework actually does not correlate with higher test scores. This is from gradeschools.org. All of these assignments don't allow us to have a life outside of school. It's mostly just work. I'll use my life as an example. My carpool usually comes to pick me up at somewhere between 3 o'clock and 3:10. I live about 20 minutes away from school, so I get home at around 3:30, 3:40ish. When I get home, I have to take a 40-minute nap because I'm dead from school. And if I don't take the nap, I'll fall asleep in my chair and I'll wake up sometime who knows when. After I wake up, I'll get a snack, which takes about 20 minutes to eat. By the time I start my work, it's usually about 4:30, which seems like plenty of time, but for a lot of kids it's not. Depending on how many assignments our classes give us, we can spend up to 4 to 5 hours working on homework. And don't even get me started on when we have projects, homework, and tests all on the same days. I'm also in Boy Scouts and in Taekwondo. Boy Scouts starts at 7 o'clock and goes to 8:30 on Mondays. Taekwondo starts at 7:10 and ends at around 8 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Alright, I'll stop rambling about the activities and work I have. My point is, just with the amount of homework that we have alone, it is nearly impossible to do these kinds of activities outside of school. I find myself having to skip meetings and classes just because the load of homework is so massive. Now, there are two reasons why I decided to talk about the loads of assignments and the lack of time. The first reason being that it doesn't allow us to experience new things. Education is about learning new information, but what if we want to be educated in something that is not typically taught in a normal school? Let's say there was a student that wanted to be a dancer and wanted to take dance lessons, but didn't have the time to do so because of all the work that the student's teachers were giving them. And yes, the student could go to a performing arts school, but the student's parents aren't able to send them to a dance school because there's not one in their area. At this point, the education is not helping to give that student more options. It is actually limiting the student to a career choice that isn't their true passion. The first thing we must do in order to gain freedom in our education is to limit the amount of work that students are given. There's also another reason why I wanted to talk about the loads of homework and the lack of time that we had. What if our career doesn't involve any of these topics and it was pointless to do them in the first place? With the amount of work we put into studying and to taking all these courses, we should have at least a couple classes that have to do with the subject we are most interested in. Let's use me as an example again. I'm attending the STEM Academy. Not because I want to be challenged, but because I want to go to a good high school that provides a challenge that looks great on college applications. But I'm interested in computer science, and there's not a single class at the school that allows me to take a computer science related class. Yes, it looks good that I'm taking all these AP and honors classes, but they do nothing for my passion. The only class that will actually help me is math, because that's a requirement for programming, even though I hate math. But that's the price I have to pay to go to a good high school that will allow me to get into a good college. My choices are limited because of the need of a good education. Researcher and psychologist from Stanford University, Carol Dweck, found that if students believe that their maximum performance is how they perform in a certain moment, then they will think that that is their limit, and they cannot go beyond that. This is how students are at school with grades. If you can't reach the goal of straight A's, then the kids may think of their failures, and sometimes they just give up. Okay, now let's move on to how we can better the high school and college experience. So, I believe that some classes that are taken in high school are necessary. However, there are a lot of unnecessary classes that limit the choices of students. Now, let's look at the A through G requirements for RESD. According to RESDlink.org, students need at least 3 years of history/social sciences, 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 1 year of life science, and 1 year physical science, 2 years of foreign language, 1 year of fine arts, 4 years of electives, and 2 years of physical education. Now, let's say that I wanted to be a computer programmer. According to learnhowtobecome.org, I need to have a degree in either software engineering, computer science, information technology, information systems and security, and or computer engineering or a similar field. Generally speaking, I really only need math and maybe a foreign language to prove that I'm able to learn more than one language, since programming is all about learning new languages. Then I would also probably need to take a computer science related course for my electives. That's pretty much all I need to do in order to become a decent programmer. Now, that's not to say that some classes aren't important. Some classes are there so that a student can become more informed and a contributing citizen in society. Classes like literature and history, but that still leaves a lot of open room for classes that interest or contribute to the student's career choice. Marion Brady, a classroom teacher and writer of history and culture textbooks, has a very interesting take on how the high school system should work. He believes that we should make every required course at the high school level an elective. Now, I know what y'all are thinking, that this sounds insane, but allow me to enlighten you. In Brady's article, he talks about how, based on his experience from being a student in a classroom to being a teacher watching the students in the classroom, there is always a large amount of disengagement between the students and the teacher. His first method to fix this was to liven up the classroom environment and involve the students in activities where they need to put the newly learned skills to the test, which is a good idea, but then that puts a much heavier load on the teachers to make everything interactive, and I know they wouldn't want to do that. But for a second argument, he argues that the most effective way to allow kids to be engaged is to let them choose their own path. People are very diverse and have different strengths and weaknesses. If we force them all to follow a certain standard, then the ones who are compatible with the standard will prevail, while the other kids that don't, won't. He backs up his argument by talking about how kids will test these limits and try and take the easy street, but they will eventually figure out what path they want to take, and I agree with this 100%. I know from personal experience that the older I get, the more mature and the more focused on my goals I become. Just looking at me from the beginning of my freshman year till now, I have reworked my work ethic to get better grades and perform better on tests. Even in the beginning of sophomore year, I remember that I failed my first 2 AP Euro quizzes, and I was wondering why that happened and how I could fix it. For the next quiz, I decided to read the whole chapter and take extensive notes on it. And guess what? I got an A on almost every quiz after that. However, like I said before, I believe that some classes should be required in order to create a more informed student, but for the most part, there should be more choice. So, for a quick recap, the freedom that we have as of right now is okay, but it needs to be improved. Education is a necessity, especially from 1st to 8th grade, but after that, it should be focused more on your preferences. Schools shouldn't be focused so much on how well a student is doing in the required courses, but rather the courses that they're passionate about. The loads of assignments need to be lessened to give students more time to explore new activities and new hobbies. There are some classes that should be required, such as literature, math, and history. And last but not least, because of the amount of diversity in students, we should be allowed to choose our own path based on what we enjoy doing and not by what the school system expects us to know. Thank you.